Hello, and welcome to
Distance learning.
Let's go ahead and dive into dodging and burning via curves. There is a handout on this exciting information, which is handout number 9. It's there on the Googly Drive. It goes through 2 techniques. The first one is the bad technique that you should not use. It's called gray overlay blended layer. I mention it because people use it. You should not use it, at least not in this class. So don't do it. It also goes over the technique you should do, which is using a curves layer. So that's the good one. All right, let's go ahead and do that. Let's go and open up the demo file. So this is a nice picture, right? Lovely people. This was also from an Ethiopian Mels sort of wedding party thing, which good time. And, you know, I'm just some shitty photographer. So the dress is a little bit too bright. His face is a little bit too dark, right? Why is that? Well, it's because my flash is right there. Her dress is white. His head is a little bit farther away. So most of my flash is landing right on her. I probably also, I'm trying to figure, I guess my flash is directly overhead. So it's basically pointed right at this poor kid. So I would like to bring him up a little bit and her down a little bit. It's not a huge adjustment, right? If you can make a small adjustment, that's going to be good. Also, be conscious about skin tone, right? I don't want to go in here and make his skin tone match her skin tone because his skin tone is darker than her skin tone. I don't want to be going around fucking shit up in some bad racist way. So what we're going to do to start with our dodging and burning is the first thing we do when I'm doing an adjustment layer like this, right? Especially if I'm doing a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to go ahead and take the marquee tool, that's M on the keyboard. Why is it called the marquee tool? Well, it makes these little marching ants. And if you think back in the recesses of history, if you have like a movie marquee and it has those like flashing lights going around it, right? I don't remember that either. I guess it's from the 1940s. That's why this gets that name. You can also just think of it as marching ants and say that the M for marquee tool stands for M for marching ants, but it's just a selection box. So hit M on the keyboard to get it, and then I'm going to draw a box around the thing that I would like to adjust. Which part do I want to adjust? I would like to adjust, let's see. I'll start with him. So I'm going to take that marquee tool and I'm going to draw a box around the area that I want to adjust. I'm going to draw that box, being careful to only include the thing that I want to make brighter, right? I'm not trying to select the whole thing. I'm just trying to select an area that is representative of the part I want to make brighter. I want to make sure that that area does not include other things that I do not want to make brighter. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I'm going to go ahead and make that adjustment just to this rectangle. And if I have additional areas in there when I go in and make that adjustment, it's going to throw off my ability to tell how much adjustment is needed, right? So if let's say I ignore that. Let's say I just go in here and make a curves layer, and I'm like, okay, I want to make his skin tone a little bit brighter. You know, by the time I've made that much adjustment, she looks way overexposed, and it is very difficult for me to evaluate his skin tone because I'm so busy being distracted by how shitty the rest of the picture looks. So don't do that. Take that curves layer, throw it out. Grab that marquee tool, M on the keyboard, draw a box just on his face, come down here, black and white cookie, right? Curves layer, beautiful, drag up the midtones, and take a look at it. Yeah, That looks fine. I want to go a little bit farther than what I want my eventual adjustment to be, because I want to have a little bit of wiggle room as I'm brushing it in later. So I've gone ahead, I've done that. In doing that, right, it only affected that one area. Right? That was the whole damn point. Why did it only affect that area? Well, if I come over here and option click on my layer mask, remember option click shows us the layer mask in black and white. We did that last time with the adjustment layer on the flowers. I could also come in and look at it in channels if I wanted to, but this is more effective. My layer mask is masked off to only be affecting that one area. If I make a new adjustment layer, if I have an active selection, Photoshop will automatically use that active selection as a layer mask. So draw that box first, right? With that active selection, go up there, make a new adjustment layer, and poof, it gives me that area as my layer mask. So that's super convenient, but it is also, option click to get it back, useless right now, right? It was good for us evaluating things. It's not the way we want the actual image to appear. So how do I get rid of it? Well, remember the layer mask, it's just blackness and whiteness. So I come over here to my layer, and pull that up here. I'm going to rename it Lighten Midtones Uncle's Face. I'm saying uncle, not because I'm racist, but because that was my friend's uncle. So there we go, that's great. And what I want to do, I want to click on that layer mask, right? You see those little squares or little corners on the layer mask thumbnail. That means that it's active, right? So whatever I do, if I start painting things in there, it's going to be on the layer mask. With that active, I hit Command A for select all. I could also do that up here in the edit menu. Edit menu, select menu. So I could come up there and do select all there, but I'm just going to hit Command A on the keyboard. Now I want to make sure that I have black paint as my background color. So I can do that by, if I am on that layer mask, I hit D for default. It will give me black background, white foreground. If I had it backwards, I can hit X on the keyboard and it'll swap foreground and background. Remember that from last week. So with black as my background color and select all active, I just hit delete and it clears out that whole thing. If I had white as my background color and hit delete, it would make the whole thing white, and that would mean that I had no mask on there, right? Everything was getting that layer, that adjustment layer applied to it. If you do that, it's no big deal. You can hit Command I to invert it, or, right, with the whole thing still selected, just make sure hit X to go back to black background color and hit delete again. Okay, so now I have my adjustment layer on there, but if I turn it on and off, it ain't doing nothing. So you're like, good, Brad, it just took you 10 minutes to accomplish nothing. What I want to do now is go back in with a soft brush with low flow, with ideally a tablet, but I don't have one, and brush that adjustment in, right? So here we go. I'm going to grab my brush, B on the keyboard. I'm going to make sure that I have white paint selected as my foreground color, right? I can do that again. If I hit D on the keyboard, check what I get. If it's backwards, I hit X until it's the right one around. But there we go, white foreground color. Got B to get my brush. I'm going to come up here to my contextual menu for the brush. And I can either come up here and click on that and give it a size and a hardness, or I can go over here to the brush palette, which is also, if I hit F5 on the keyboard, that would do it. And I can adjust those things here. I'm going to do it here in this brush settings palette. The reason I'm going to do it there is that I can also show you where you would set some things if you had a Wacom tablet, which again, I am like trying to be level playing field here, so I do not have one. I'm going to show you it is possible. But if you do have one, pay attention. Okay, so brush tip shape, I want my hardness to be 0. When I'm doing something like this, when I'm doing an exposure adjustment, I want my brush to be as soft as possible. Now, when we did the black and white masking, we wanted an abrupt transition, right? It was like black and white, black and white, black and white, color. That was great, so a hard edge brush was fine. With this, we want it to be a subtle increase in tone where we don't notice a boundary, right? I don't want there to be a hard boundary between the area that was lighter and the area that remained the same, because that will look totally artificial and silly. So soft brush, that's great. Make sure the spacing is low so we don't get those caterpillar bumps. Cool. I'm going to go in here to this list over here on the side. If you don't see this stuff, make sure that you have brush tip shape selected. I want shape dynamics unchecked if I'm working with a tablet. Remember, I don't want to be able to push down and have my brush get bigger and smaller, because you can't really see that in real time and it's not helpful. If I'm working on a tablet, I do want transfer. So with that, if I'm working on a tablet, I will click transfer, come over here to control, and make sure it is set to pen pressure, pen pressure. Now, right now, I have this little exclamation point there because Photoshop is telling me, dude, there's no pen. So it's not going to do me any good. I'm going to uncheck it, but have you a Wacom, go ahead and do that. All right, so soft brush, that's awesome. I'm going to go ahead and close that up. The size is very small, so I'm going to hit the square brackets on the keyboard to make it a more reasonable size. Remember, square brackets are just above and a little bit to the left of your return key on your keyboard. And then I'm going to come up here to my contextual menu again, where we have opacity and flow, and I'm going to set my flow real low. I'm going to set it to 6%. That may still be too high. We want it to be incredibly slow so that it can very, very slowly sort of fade in. All right, so I'm going to do that here, and then we'll do another sort of sampling thing. Okay, so boop, I did that. You're like, Brad, what did you do? I didn't see anything happen. Well, my friends, let me come up here and turn this layer on and off. Heyo. So ideally, right, if you are doing a subtle enough job of your dodging and burning, as you were doing it, it will be almost imperceptible. You won't realize you're making a change because you don't see hard edges to it. If I had gone in here and done that with a brush that did have, say, hard edges and a high flow, right? That's not good. Look at that. That's just, who hired this retoucher? They're out. So again, grab the brush up here, hardness 0, flow 6. Brad, where does the number 6 come from? Listen, it comes from experience. Come back over here, and when I go and turn it on and off, that looks pretty good. Now, if the area seems good, but the amount is just a little bit too much, you can always go into that curves adjustment. And put the properties over there. Oh, come on. There we go. I can always go in there and pull that down or up a little bit more to fine tune it, but I would say that seems pretty good. One thing to remember, when we go to print, your print is always going to be a little bit darker than your screen. Your screen is like nice glowy pixels. Your print is ink on paper and dependent on light reflecting off of it to give you an image. All right, so that was pretty good. I'm going to go ahead now and double check my mask, right? So that was what? Option, click on that mask. That seems fine. One thing that people do all the time, they forget to clear out that initial rectangular selection. So you go and look at this, and it looks like that, except with like little corners on it, right? That person loses points. Don't do it. Or you're like, oh, I don't need to clear it out. I'm just going to brush it away, right? Fail. Don't do it. End up with little corners. Looks terrible. All right. Option, click back on that to go back to normal. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab the marquee tool, marching ants, whatever you want to call it, draw a box on her dress, and I'm going to bring that down a little bit. So same thing, right? Make the marquee tool, come over here, get the black and white cookie, grab a curves adjustment, rename that curves adjustment, darken, midtones, niece's, can't spell niece, dress, awesome. I'm going to bring that down a little bit more than I think I'm going to need. Great. come back here, make sure that I have that layer mask active, has little corners on it. Make sure that I have black paint as my background color, Command A to select all, delete on the keyboard to clear it out, deselect, Command D. You can also do that up here in the select menu. Grab a brush, right? My brush settings are still the same. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger because the dress is a slightly bigger area. And there we go. Cool. Bring that shoulder down. There we go. We'll hit on the face, a little bit of the front of the dress there. Cool. So turn it on, turn it off. That definitely looks better. It looks less blown out, less sort of like hot. So that's very good. Right, I'm going to go ahead and remember option click that mask. That seems fine. I don't see any obvious screw ups. The nice thing about all of this, right, is that it is a non-destructive edit. If you print it and it doesn't look good, right, you can either turn off those layers and redo the whole thing. You can go back in there and adjust those masks, right? I could go in here and select all, delete, do the mask again, or I could just go in with a brush if I was like, oh, you know, I'd also like to bring up his hand a little bit, go back to that lighten layer, right? Bring up the hand and the arm, and rename the layer, face and hands. The other thing that you can do is you aren't restricted to having one curves layer that makes things lighter and one curves layer that makes things darker, right? If the amount of adjustment that I need for the face is different from the amount of adjustment that I need for the arms, which frankly it is, I can make another curves layer that is just adjusting the arms, and it would be the same protocol. Grab the marquee tool, make a box that's just arms, go into the black and white cookie, make a curves layer, bring the midtones up, rename your layer something rational, select all, clear it all out, grab your brush, paint it back in, boom, awesomeness. So there you go. That is dodging and burning. I'm just going to double check what the handout says in case there's anything that is wonky in there. No, okay, so one thing that you can run into is that sometimes when you're making dodging and burning adjustments, you will end up with color shifts. And there are a couple of ways to handle that. I'm going to show you one way right now because A, it's in the handout, and B, it will also introduce using layer groups, which we did before back when we had the van and the road and the mountain and the sun. But I'm going to come down here, select my two adjustment layers, make a folder, right? Because I had them selected when I made it, it automatically puts them in there. I'll rename that dodge and burn. And then I'm going to go to the, does anyone even know what dodging and burning means? Like, which is dodging, which is burning? You know, probably not. It's a, it is a sort of outdated terminology, but sorry, I have to go to the community garden and bring the compost in. So calling it dodging and burning, I don't know. That's what I'm going to call it. You should call it that because probably I tell you to, but whatever. So I'm going to go in here to where we darken the dress, and I'm just going to throw a hue saturation layer on there. I'm going to use a clipping mask to restrict that hue saturation layer to the thing that darkened the dress. So again, clipping masks, right? We've used them before to restrict an adjustment to a pixel layer. I can also use them to restrict an adjustment to wherever another adjustment layer is in effect, right? So by doing this, right, I just want to affect the area that's been darkened by that curves layer. I don't want to adjust the whole thing. I don't want to go in and try and make a mask that's exactly the same spot as my darken the dress adjustment layer because that would be really hard. I don't want to go in and copy and paste the mask, because then what if I change the mask later on? I would have to go in and remember to do that again. All that's a pain in the ass. So all I do, come in there and make a clipping mask, hold down Option, go between the two until your cursor changes, click there, or of course you can go up to, with that hue saturation layer selected, layer, and create clipping mask. Okay, so with that in there, I'm just gonna bring the saturation down a smidge. That seems fine. Honestly, I don't know that it's really necessary in here, but I'm doing it because the handout says to, and I just can't help myself. So I will rename that slight desaturation on darkened dress. And we are good to go. Well done.